Hello.
Hello, welcome back.
How's it going?
This is Behind the Pixel. My name is Will.
My name is Kathryn.
And we are the co-founders of Open Pixel Studios. We are running this podcast. This is our second season. We've been in business for about 7 years, in February, I think. Mm-hmm. And this is Behind the Pixel, where we try to bridge the knowledge gap between those who buy creative content and those who make it.
You did great.
Let that sink in.
That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm getting better at remembering that. So
Good for you.
This is a hack. I'm pretty sure this is a hack.
Okay.
And today we're talking about source files. Source files, getting down to the sources.
You gotta look at your sources.
Get your sources.
Check your sources.
Yeah. Check your sources.
Why don't you tell us what source files are?
Yes, what the heck are they, and what do they do, and why do they hold all the superpowers? I think is the tagline of this episode.
Sure.
So what are source files? Source files, for those of you who don't know, are what's the best way to describe this? So here's my analogy. If you're hiring a chef to make a cake, the chef would be the artists, right? Who are making the thing. Artists have tools like a baking pan or a whisk or an electronic whisk, or I guess that's all I know.
An automatic stirrer that stirs in your pan for you, so you don't have to use your hand to do anything. That's basically the AI of the tools.
That's right. Yeah.
so stupid.
Right. So those are the tools we use. And then there's the ingredients. And then the ingredients in our line of work, usually a chef would have to go out and buy those ingredients. We can sometimes do that. We can go out and buy some of the things that we need, but we also make our own ingredients, right? Mm-hmm. We churn, or I don't know. Let's skip the analogy for a second, but we're making stuff in order to create the final. And I think that's kind of the idea I'm getting at, right? Mm-hmm. So we put all those things together and we create, if you're going back to the analogy, if you're the chef, you're creating a batter. And then the batter is the thing that you actually put under pressure and under heat, like a deadline, and bake the final video, right? Like if I'm mixing my analogies here. Mm-hmm. So source files are the ingredients and the batter. And you can only access those two if you have the tools.
Right.
You getting me? So these are files. So say you work in Photoshop. Photoshop is a very easy thing to understand, wrap your head around. Photoshop, if I make an edit to a photo, I have actually two files. I have the file that I give to you, and then I have the file that I created that thing with, and that is the source file. And I think most marketers know that. Some nonprofit communication folks might not know that. But that's what source files are.
Yeah, so if that's the case, occasionally, so as a company, sometimes you'll get asked to provide those source files or to not provide those source files, depending on the project and the client type and what have you. So is there a reason why a client would use source files and ask us for them?
Yes. That's a great question. That's actually going into my next thing. Yeah, people usually tend to ask for these source files at the end of the project. Mm-hmm. And usually marketing folks will ask for source files because they're trying to do something specific with them in case of emergency. Now, that emergency might be the date of this event shifted. It's no longer on December 7th. It's on December 25th. It's a Christmas thing now. I don't know why.
Right. And we as marketers maybe have Photoshop as part of our wheelhouse. So we could just go in, change that quick date, and then be done.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, this gets a little pervasive from folks who may want to be taking advantage of the type of work that you might be giving away as an artist. So in a scenario where, let's say you're creating graphics for a football game, when you watch a football game, Go Sports Ball. You have a ton of stuff in the graphics that pop up, stats and players' names, and I forget what they call that, but it's like a sports package. Those are all created with templates because they all have to swap out. You have how many players on a football team? I guess it depends, but you have all these players on a football
300
team.
technically.
Yeah, and you have to have stats for all of them, and so they all have to look the same and that kind of thing. So you create these templates, and then you kind of give them away because they need to use them consistently for each broadcast. That makes sense because that's part of the package. Now, when you're a marketer or a nonprofit, and you have a piece of collateral, some sort of video that you've made, it's an ad maybe for a product, and there's animation in there, right? If you use the source files for a different product, but use the same animation, then you're kind of skipping out on hiring someone else to do a different thing for a different product. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of power in the source files because you can replace, alter, change all of the things within that file to kind of create something new. And there's a sort of moral question there, right? Should you do that? I don't know. It's a going in a little bit into the controversy a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question there too of like whether or not the biggest challenge to working with source files is, and I think this is why I think source files come in two different layers. Like there's source files in terms of like we give you everything that we've worked on the project from start to finish, even if you don't have the ability to even open it or work with it. Like
which happens often because
there's time you might not have a 3D package, like, and it's expensive to get it just for the sake of opening a file that you then haven't had experience working with. And like, you might look at this, Maya file and be like, okay, great. I can open this character, but how do I render it? What does that mean? Like, so there's a lot there. A second issue is that a lot of times almost every animation studio will have like proprietary pipelines or tools or software that they work within. So even within the tool that you're being able to have, like if you have After Effects, let's say, and you try to open a source file, you might not have the plugins that the animator used in order to be able to open it completely. So there might be missing links. There might be like, you might get all sorts of pop-ups that say, can't use, a big one is like particular. So there's things like that just make it more difficult to work with. If you're trying to use, I think we try to see source files on two different fronts, because there's a source file level to me that's for the purpose of repurposing for marketing. So what I mean by that is like having the ability to take a pose of a character that might be waving or doing something or looking happy, whatever that might be in that particular, that was in the animation, that you then want that one image for your presentation purpose. That's a little bit different of a situation for me, that it's still a source file that you might be giving, but it's packaged in such a way that still allows you to like open what you need. So it's just it's a different way of approaching it. But also, to your point earlier, you would hope that for that presentation that you're also working with a graphic design team or the same studio to be able to make your presentation look a lot better, because they'll also, as the creators of that, they're going to be able to more easily go in and make changes and like extract things as you need it. So yeah, it kind of depends.
Especially if you're going from video to print, oftentimes what happens is our video files are like 1080p. For print, you need to have like a 300 ppi DPI like file that's like huge,
right?
And like
unless we're animating everything in 4K.
Exactly. Like you can't get that unless you make larger renders, and like you still need the tools to do that. So those are very specific examples, but there are other times when I've heard artists being like, hey, like they're asking for source files. Do I charge for these? Like they contain so much more information that is sort of, in a way, detrimental to my business, right? Like
it could be.
You're taking me out of the loop. And you're giving away like all my stuff.
I think that's why
on
it's
the flip
important
side,
to.
yeah.
Oh, Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the flip side, I've had clients ask for source files for projects that are older, that are consistent on a yearly basis.
Mm.
And like those, they're not helpful. Like the source files that come in from last year, because this year is an entirely different design and like, it's an entirely different visual thing. It's not going to help you to have those, like, because it's a yearly event that changes every, so.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
The last piece too about source files that you can expect, I think, I had a friend, colleague say this to me, is that we provide source files for free, but we do not clean them up. So, and by that, he meant all the layers are whatever they are. There's no renaming. There's no folder structure.
Yeah.
Like whatever you got.
Have fun with that organization. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to pay us to clean it up, because it does take some time. It takes some time to clean up files, especially when we're working on deadline and we're churning out things really quickly. We're not naming things necessarily the right way.
You're supposed to. You got to do it. Got to stay clean.
I'm of the mindset that you clean it up after you're done. I'll work through it.
We have two different organization styles.
Well, because I think I don't know exactly if I'm going to use that layer. Sometimes I make a layer for like measuring purposes and it gets left in the file, and then I'm like, who cares?
This is a side note, but I think that comes from our different like artistic backgrounds. Cause like for me, it's like the idea of like knowing that it's quite possible that another character animator has to work in my shop for some reason. And so like it needs to be clean so that they can go through it and be like, oh, I know what to take from this. I know what to change. Like, especially if they're dealing with match on actions or things like that. So it's just a weird, like, it's a courtesy to other artists, but you're not thinking about it necessarily from the client perspective.
Yeah, in a weird way, you're kind of talking to the other artist. If you're gonna give your file to someone else, like you're kind of secretly like having this other language that you're giving away to someone else. Like there's
you're giving me
there's
ideas
like thoughts
to
in the file.
Throw secrets into my source files.
I have done that.
Fun things.
I have totally done that. Like I've renamed all the
tangent.
layers. Anyway, yeah.
That's funny.
So anyway, those are source files. So I think you talked about all the problems. We talked about proprietary tools and how they get in the way. They can be expensive. There's messiness in files. Do we charge for them? That's kind of up to the artist or studio.
I would say my advice to anyone who is thinking about getting source files from their creative house, just establish what your goals are with them beforehand, because then if, it depends on the relationship you have with them, the intention behind the source files, that's going to determine whether a creative comes back and says, okay, well, we can give you this, or they say, okay, here, we've packaged it in such a way, this is how you can use it. Like I think it's a testament to being communicative about your like approach to things and why that's going to change the file type that you get. So just be open and have a conversation about what types of source files you need, why you need them, because there might be a better way to package what you're looking for, right? It might be, you might say, hey, I just need that pose from that character to put into our other marketing campaign because this character is going to be used throughout. Maybe it's a mascot. In that case, like, I don't necessarily need to package all the Maya files that I use to animate it because you can't open that. But I can send you a couple renders that are just that individual frame. So, it's just having conversation about that.
Yeah. Yeah. The why is really important. That's a good point. The other thing that I'll mention lastly here is locking source files. So there's technically ways to bake in animation so that no one really can change it. And that's where the chef is making the batter. Like the way you make if I just handed you over some batter and you made a cake, it would taste delicious because I'm a good chef or whatever. But if I gave you the ingredients to that batter, you might not make the same batter. right? You might make
Mhm.
some other okay batter. And it tastes fine, But anyway, so there are ways to lock those files. So be aware of that too. Some artists might be doing that. I don't know. We do that in specific situations only because we use proprietary software in our animations that require kind of that to be the case. So
Right. So it just depends. Be honest and transparent with your goals behind source files. They shouldn't be intimidating or scary per se. We don't want you to have source files and then be like, what do I even do? How do I do this? Or like,
Right.
It's a pain in the butt to work with. So I think it's just, be mindful and have those conversations.
Cool. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And we will see you in the next episode.
You're welcome. I'm happy to listen anytime.
Oh. Are we just talking to each other? I get it. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I did
sense.
a riff, a good improv riff or something.
I'm cutting all of this. All right.
See you next time.